A loss and damage fund from the wealthier nations has been adopted at the COP28 meeting in Dubai. This means wealthier Western nations will now pay for loss and damages incurred by African countries as a result of climate change. Our senior political reporter Ziyanda Ngcobo joins us now from Expo City in Dubai. Ziyanda, good afternoon to you. What's been agreed there?
Well, it is the breaking news coming out of COP28, Stephen Curtis. Pledges have been made by wealthier Western nations and Middle Eastern countries as well towards that loss and damage fund. A discussion took place at COP27 in Egypt where this fund was agreed to, but now this historic moment where on the first day of this convention on climate change, an agreement has been reached. I can tell you that $100 million has been committed to by the UAE, Germany committing the same, the UK committing £40 million and £20 million for other arrangements, Japan also contributing $10 million and the US committing $17.5 million. So that fund, Stephen, critical for countries like South Africa. You're under the grips of a heat wave as we speak, but towards damages caused by floods, wildfires that we saw in the Western Cape. That's what this fund is designed for.
And Ziyanda, I mean, one presumes that this is going to make a big difference. I mean, just to get this kind of agreement is important. It's an important first step.
It certainly is, Stephen, and it's also the reason why it's also being dubbed as historic. Not only is it because it was assigned to by countries on the first day, I should say, but also because it's talking about the speed at which countries are moving towards actually operationalizing the plans that they speak about. So since COP27, there's been about 5 committee meetings to talk about this loss and damage fund. In fact, the African continent has been very vocal about this, because we contribute the least towards carbon emissions, and yet we are the worst affected. Whether you're talking about, the floods in Rwanda, you talk about the drought in Zimbabwe, and our very own situation at home, our continent is adversely affected by climate change that isn't necessarily caused by us. So it's also a commitment to deal with issues of equity when it comes to the financing of issues around climate change, issues around new technologies that need to be adopted in terms of dealing with climate change, and also helping African countries fast-track their processes to reduce their carbon emissions. So it's not just a talk shop this time around, it would seem, but also real pledges and putting their money where their mouths are, in particular from the richer countries.
Ziyanda Ngcobo, thank you very much indeed. Our senior political reporter live at COP28 this year. News from other parts of the continent. The Court of Justice in East Africa dismissing a petition by several civil society organizations challenging the construction of a crude oil pipeline in the region. The court ruled it did not have the jurisdiction to hear the bid. The pipeline is part of a $10 billion project by the French energy giant Total Energies to develop Ugandan oil fields and ship oil to Tanzania for export. The scheme's been under fire from activists who say it'll harm fragile ecosystems and the livelihoods of tens of thousands of people. Civil society groups plan to appeal that ruling. Madagascar's army is warning against any attempt to destabilize the country. It follows the arrest of 2 officers who've been charged with inciting a rebellion over the presidential elections. 10 out of 12 opposition candidates boycotting the vote following weeks of violence. The Electoral Commission declaring incumbent Andre Rajoelina the winner. The Constitutional Court there due to certify the results on Friday. 2 army officers will remain in custody until a hearing in January. The European Union says it's cancelling its election observer mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, citing technical reasons. The announcement comes a day after the EU declared that the team could not spread out around the vast Central African nation amid security concerns. The Union also says essential telecommunications equipment has not been provided to observers ahead of the elections due on December the 20th. The DRC due to hold legislative and presidential elections. The incumbent president, Felix Tshisekedi, is seeking a 2nd term. In Sudan, women are now bearing the brunt of the vicious war in that country. The World Health Organization says more than 4 million women and girls are at risk of sexual violence in Sudan. A new United Nations report describes how women and girls are being abducted and held in slave-like conditions in areas controlled by the Rapid Support Forces. The ongoing violence has ravaged the country for the last 7 months. More than 6 million people have been displaced, including over 100,000 pregnant women. The Economic Community of West African States is set to rule on a complaint over former Niger President Mohamed Bazoum's detention. The complaint was brought by Bazoum's lawyers. He was ousted in a coup in July. He's been held at his residence in the heart of the presidential palace in Niamey. Bazoum is the 5th president from Niger to be overthrown in a coup since the country gained independence from France in 1960. Libyan authorities have deported at least 248 undocumented migrants back to Niger and Chad. They say it's a collective effort that will see people staying in their countries and live there in dignity. The North African countries become a hub for